So today, lads, we're going to be talking about Sydney Colson, and she went on to Aaliyah Boston's podcast yesterday and talked about the kind of negativity that she received from being a part of the Indiana Fever. And we all kind of know that that's something that is happening.
Sydney Colson recently disclosed information that validates everyone's suspicions regarding the Indiana Fever. She acknowledged on Aaliyah Boston's show that she received more abuse after joining the Fever than throughout her whole professional life. She signed with Indiana, but that was the only reason why people turned against her. Even a seasoned player who has always been well-liked was taken aback by the extreme criticism. Across the league, should WNBA players be subjected to hatred simply for choosing to play for the Indiana Fever?
Whether I'm playing, we want things to look like what we want them to look like. And I knew coming into this season, but once people started talking, once I was here and experiencing it, like, people had a lot to say. There was a lot of negativity.
During his appearance on Aaliyah Boston's podcast, Sydney Colson revealed some shocking facts that the WNBA most likely wishes had remained confidential. Colson candidly discussed the hostility she encountered after signing with the Indiana Fever, and she didn't sugarcoat it. For the first time in her career, she acknowledged that she was actively loathed by people, and the sole explanation was that she joined the Fever group. That's an outrageous admission that validates what the majority of Fever players haven't been prepared to publicly discuss, but they have been struggling with all season. Colson clarified that she knew going into the season that joining the Fever may draw some attention. However, she was unprepared for the degree of hatred she truly encountered. She stated that generally people have liked her throughout her career. She is well known for being affable and humorous, even in cases where some individuals failed to discover. Her style of humor was funny. There was no real hatred or distaste, just a different sense of comedy. Joining the Fever, however, changed all of that. All of a sudden, she was receiving negative feedback from people who had never had an issue with her prior to.
And I just looked at it like, I'm not used to this. Typically, I'm the person that people are just like, oh, we love Sid, that's funny, blah, blah, blah. Some people be like, not funny, and I'm like, they don't have a sense of humor. But like, for the most part, people have liked me and have admired me from the outside, but that's never made me do the things I do. Like, I do the things that I do because I enjoy my teammates, because I like comedy, because I like whatever I'm doing, not for other people's approval. So once I got here and was experiencing people's disapproval, it didn't really faze me because I still understood. I think I understood even more so.
Her remarks are particularly noteworthy because Colson is an experienced player who has been in the league for. She has played for several teams over the years. She has encountered many circumstances in locker rooms. She's not a young athlete who doesn't understand what normal looks like. When she talks about the hatred she experienced after contracting the illness, was unlike anything she had ever encountered, which is significant. She has a foundation for comparison. And the way that fans and other players reacted to her signing makes the Fever condition particularly poisonous. Colson clarified that she did nothing wrong to deserve the criticism. People detested her for no apparent reason. Aside from her connection to the Fever, that's the important thing. She remained the same person. She didn't abruptly stop being amusing or less appealing. She didn't do anything contentious or problematic. The only thing she did wrong was sign a contract with Indiana, and that was plenty for folks to fully despise her. That demonstrates how profound some WNBA fans and possibly some players harbor animosity toward the Fever.
Not liking you for no reason, I'm probably exactly where I need to be. So once the injury happened, I'm like, once again, this is something that I don't fully get, but this must be where I need to be, sidelined. And it made me an even more vocal leader. It made me pay attention to things maybe that I wasn't paying attention to that other people had going on, so I could be more tapped into if they're having a hard time and I need to come over here and help them out, whether it's mental, physical, whatever. I had to get outside of me. And that was the lesson that I learned in this. I hope it's the one that God wanted me to learn, but yeah, it was just one of those things that nobody wants that to happen. but you still have to move forward and figure out a way to still be, of service to yourself.
The intriguing aspect is Colson's reaction to and processing of that hatred. Once she discovered that people were criticizing her without any justification, in fact, it reinforced to her that she was precisely where she had to be. When others despise you without reason, when their hostility is obviously unreasonable and unjustified, that's frequently an indication that you're doing something correctly or that you're in a situation that puts those who don't want you there in danger. Colson seems to realize that she was not the target of the hatred. It was about what the Fever stood for, and the fact that the team's success put some people's established order in jeopardy. In upkeep.
All know that that's something that's happening with all these players. Is like they're just not in any way happy as long as they have to publicly hate the Fever, and the only way you can get back into these people's good graces is by pulling a Dawana Bonner. By just not playing for the Fever anymore, it doesn't matter. You have to pull a Dawana Bonner.
Additionally, Colson disclosed that she had a sincere desire to play for the Fever. This wasn't a grudging signing or a final option, since she was unable to find a better deal. In particular, she desired to be in Indiana. She was fond of Kelsey Mitchell and likely discussed the team culture with her. She realized that she and Caitlin Clark would likely get along because they are similar individuals. She thought her personality and playing style would work well with the Fever. That explains the hatred she was subjected to. Even more ridiculous, people penalized her for choosing Indiana because she wanted to be there. That decision. Colson's experience was further complicated by the fact that she had to deal with an injury during the season. She had to miss a lot of time due to a meniscus tear. Being ignored when you've recently joined a new team and are attempting. It's annoying to establish yourself in any situation. However, addressing that while simultaneously being inundated with unwarranted animosity from supporters and potentially covert animosity from players on opposing teams' causes, it is exponentially more difficult. According to Colson, the injury made her an even more outspoken leader and made her aware of what her teammates were going through in order to provide them with more support. That remark regarding endorsing teammates is significant since it implies that Colson realized her teammates had a Fever as well. Overcoming obstacles and negativity that may not have been apparent from the outside, she presented herself as someone who could support her colleagues emotionally and psychologically throughout trying times. That's what a seasoned leader does. And it was just what the Fever required. However, it also shows that the toxicity aimed at the Fever wasn't simply having an impact on Colson. Several athletes on the roster were impacted, and they required assistance to deal with the irrational. They are being treated with hostility. It's encouraging that Colson is prepared to publicly state that she was despised by others for no apparent reason. The majority of players avoid that fact. They will admit some negative, but they will minimize it or attempt to justify it. Colson simply outlined it. She joined the Fever, and for that, people detested her. There was no other explanation. This candor is crucial because it confirms what supporters of the Fever have been saying all along. The way Fever players and supporters are treated is abnormal. It's not your typical sports rivalry. It's more intimate and ugly. The analogy to Dana Bonner that is brought up in conversations about this is quite fascinating. When Bonner left the Fever, the animosity toward her abruptly vanished. Since she was no longer connected to Indiana, she was welcomed back into the good graces of the larger WNBA community. This pattern shows that the hate isn't really directed at certain players or their actions. It has to do with the Fever organization itself, particularly in relation to its connection to Caitlin Clark. Any participant in the Fever gets tarnished by that relationship and vulnerable to hatred unrelated to them personally. For Fever players, this puts them in an impossible scenario. They are incapable of winning. If they succeed on the court, they are accused of taking advantage of favorable treatment or riding Clark's coattails. If they have difficulty, they are made fun of for being liabilities who hinder the team or for not being able to keep up with Clark. They are accused of being phony or attempting to capitalize on Clark's fame if they support her or say good things about the team atmosphere. They are accused of being envious or failing to support their colleague if they remain silent. There isn't a reply that will please the haters because their hatred is illogical in the first place. Additionally, Colson's remarks emphasize How the Fever have become into the most divisive club in WNBA history. They receive both more hate and more affection. More than any other team at the same time. Major market teams in other sports function similarly. Fans will applaud you if you play for the Lakers, Yankees, or Cowboys, while others will loathe you. Everyone else. The scrutiny and attention are intensified. Every error is magnified, and every achievement is discounted. Or attributed to advantages rather than aptitude. That's the reality of being a member of a team that is more important than. The distinction is that in those other leagues, joining the divisive team is typically a decision that comes with knowledge of what you're committing to. Players understand what it means to be a Yankee or Laker. They are aware of the attention and strain that accompany it in 2024 and 2025. Fever participants were unsure of what they signed up due of the incredible amount of attention and animosity the team receives throughout WNBA history. When Clark arrived, everything about what it meant to play for Indiana was altered in ways that couldn't have been completely expected. Colson's remarks reveal a toxic aspect of WNBA fan culture that is really disturbing for the expansion of the league. When athletes are unable to sign with specific teams due to unjustified hostility and hatred, leadership must deal with that issue. The WNBA ought to be pleased that one of its teams has emerged as so well-liked and pertinent that it receives widespread notice. Instead, there's this strange animosity from segments of the fan population that appear to favor the league remaining small and specialized rather than expanding around a well-liked. Both the individual and the team. It is especially upsetting for Colson to discover additional derogatory remarks and insults aimed at her for contracting the fever. The hatred goes beyond disagreement or criticism of her choices or style of play. It's insults and personal assaults. They obviously deviate from acceptable discourse. People are discouraged from participating in the sport because of such kind of toxicity. Instead of being vibrant and inclusive, it makes the WNBA appear petty and unwelcoming. League authorities ought to feel ashamed. Know their players are being treated in this manner, but there hasn't been much of an attempt to address or call it out. Another illustration of how illogical the anti-fever movement is the remark that Lexi Hull is also receiving hate. Sentiment has developed. Hull is a diligent worker who performs her duties as a role player. She doesn't use foul language or produces drama. However, she receives vitriol just for being on the roster and having a strong friendship with Clark. That is ridiculous. Role players on well-known teams shouldn't be harassed simply because they play with a celebrity. However, given the present WNBA context, Clark's connection to the Fever makes you're a target. Colson's statement that she does what she does because she likes her colleagues and the proper way to deal with irrational hatred is not for the approval of others. You cannot allow those who harbor hatred to. You have no right to control your happiness or your decisions. Colson is aware of the negativity. Reveals more about the individuals in charge than it does about her. She is confident enough in herself to understand it and not allow it altered her perspective on her team position. Younger players may find it difficult to reach that level of emotional maturity. In the same circumstance, based on how the season went, it's true that teams don't respect the Fever and pay for it. Played out. Several teams obviously misjudged Indiana, anticipating simple victories because they fell for the myth that Clark and a few other uncompetitive role players made up the Fever. Those teams were humiliated when the Fever struck, they performed admirably, played hard, and won games they weren't supposed to. It was clear that there was no regard. And when teams failed to adequately prepare or take Indiana seriously, it cost them victories. When Clark was hurt and unable to of the lineup, the pattern became even more obvious. Teams that participated and took the sickness seriously prevailed in those games conveniently. Without the top player, teams that thought they would win easily frequently lost because the rest of the team was superior to what people acknowledged. That demonstrates that the Fever were more than a single player. However, the story had already been established, and many teams and supporters refused to change their minds. Even in the face of contradicting evidence, the recommendation on social media to use the following tab instead of the For You page is strong. It is really inappropriate for professional athletes to use random social media remarks about oneself, particularly the day following a game. The algorithm's purpose is to display your level of participation. It frequently entails displaying the most divisive and unfavorable opinions since such produce Replies. If you switch to following, you will only see content from the individuals you have choose to follow, which, instead of being toxic, you may curate to be acceptable or even encouraging. However, in reality, in the current environment, it is not possible to ask young athletes to totally cut off from social media. Social media networks are the foundation of their brands. Their social media presence frequently determines their endorsement worth. Involvement and presence, it is required of them to engage with fans and advertise their sponsors on the internet. For more WNBA Business Moves reality checks, please like and subscribe.